Okay, still talking about arrows. Now we're going to dive into the tournament arrows, the tournament side of things, what arrows I shoot for different venues. And the first arrow, and this is probably close to the setup I'll use for 90% of my tournaments. This is a GoldTip XXX. I've got the 2-inch Raptors on the back and 140 grains on the front of this thing. This is what I use for 3D, ASA, all those tournaments. Honestly, this rig could be shot, this arrow could be shot indoors, all your indoor tournaments too, you know, if you wanted to stick with one arrow. I've got the new GTO knock, which is kind of a tiny G knock. Snaps on the string so good, and that's one of the new things I love about the GoldTip components. But this arrow weighs total about 440 grains, and you could play around with point weight to get it to weigh what you wanted. But once again, talking about just every arrow in the GoldTip family, how tough they are, the straightness memory on these things. You know, the same reason I shoot GoldTip, but this particular one I shoot in all the ASA events, and most of the IBO ones too. Then still talking about the XXX, this is my indoor arrow. I've got 200 grains up front, full length arrow, and I've got the AccuNock on the back of this one, and a 4-inch fusion vane from Q2i. A lot of helical on this vane, but you don't want to run this big of a vane or that much point weight outdoors. This is my indoor arrow, 20 yards, and you can get away with it. If you run that much point weight outside, you start to get a lot of fall off, and if you run that much vane with that much helical outside, you get the parachuting effect. So this arrow is a really good 20-yard arrow, and that's why it's set up that way. Then the last arrow you'll probably see me run outdoors will be a kinetic or for tournaments. And this arrow is the smallest diameter shaft that GoldTip makes, but it's one of the heaviest. And I've got 140 grains up front, a 2.1-inch fusion vane on the back of it, and also run the GTO knock on this one as well. Shoot this arrow in Reading or any kind of field tournament, or if I was to dabble into FIDA, which I don't do very much, this is what I would use. Super heavy arrow, super tough arrow, but the smallest diameter. So if you're shooting a lot of arrows into groups or you're shooting really long distance, this is the most unbelievable setup I've ever shot outdoors at long range. You know, the fusion vanes cut the wind really good but still control the arrow. The heavy point, heavy arrow, small diameter, I mean, it's a dream when you're shooting long distance. But those 3 arrows are the 3 main arrows you'll see me shoot on 90–95% of my tournaments. All from the GoldTip line, all just as tough and just as straight.